It was just another routine flight on a state-of-the-art aircraft. Flight 237, a long-haul journey from New York to Tokyo. The passengers, a diverse mix of business travelers, vacationers, and a few families, boarded the plane with little to no thought about what would soon unfold. The flight was expected to be uneventful, with clear skies and calm winds. The crew was experienced, and the plane, well-maintained and newly outfitted with advanced navigation systems, was considered one of the safest in the skies. As the plane ascended into the clouds and began its journey across the Atlantic, everything seemed normal. However, something inexplicable began to occur. The first odd sign appeared just hours into the flight. A sudden glitch in the aircraft's communication system caused a temporary disruption in the usual air traffic control messages. At first, it seemed like a minor technical issue, something that the experienced flight crew could quickly resolve. Yet, the glitch persisted, and air traffic controllers began to lose contact with the plane entirely. The passengers remained unaware for the most part of what was happening. They were in the comfort of their seats, watching movies or chatting quietly, blissfully unaware of the growing concern unfolding among the cockpit and air traffic control centers. Minutes stretched into hours. By the time the plane had reached the mid-Atlantic, the situation had escalated. The plane's autopilot systems malfunctioned in an unpredictable way, and the pilots could not regain control. The skies outside had started to darken ominously, and an eerie fog began to surround the aircraft. There was something off about the air that didn't sit right with anyone on board. The air smelled strange, and there was a quiet buzz of static on the communication frequencies, almost like an invisible barrier was preventing the plane from communicating with the outside world. The pilots, initially calm, started to grow increasingly uneasy. Desperate attempts were made to send distress signals, but every time they tried to send a message, the systems would fail. The only sound in the cockpit was the soft hum of the engines and the faint crackling of the radio. It felt as if they were flying in isolation, floating somewhere beyond the reach of help. The plane, once confidently on its way, began to veer off its course without explanation. For hours, the pilots fought to regain control, but it was as though the plane was trapped in a different dimension, where the laws of physics and reality no longer applied. As the minutes ticked by, the sun began to set, but the darkness that followed was unlike any other the crew had ever experienced. It wasn't until the passengers began to notice strange phenomena that the full scope of the situation began to sink in. Some saw inexplicable flashes of light through the windows, while others reported hearing unsettling sounds, like whispers, emanating from the walls of the aircraft itself. The flight attendants, once calm and composed, began to panic as they felt an unsettling presence in the air, something they couldn't explain, something that made them feel as though they were being watched. The panic grew palpable in the cabin. A few passengers reported seeing shadowy figures walking down the aisles, though no one could remember seeing anyone board the flight who would fit those descriptions. Was it exhaustion or something far more sinister? One of the passengers, a seasoned pilot, stepped forward and offered his assistance. But the moment he stepped into the cockpit, he too felt a strange disorientation. He glanced at the cockpit window and saw what none of them could believe: an endless expanse of darkness surrounding them, no land or light in sight. Hours turned into days, and still there was no sign of rescue. The passengers grew restless. Some clung to hope, while others had begun to question if they would ever return home. The flight attendants worked tirelessly to calm everyone down, but even they were struggling to maintain their composure. They too began to question whether they were caught in a nightmare. The unexplainable fog outside the windows seemed to stretch out into infinity. There was no landmark, no constellation to guide them. For the first time in history, an airplane had been completely isolated, floating aimlessly in the vastness of the sky. It wasn't just a flight that had gone missing. It was as though the entire plane had been swallowed by some unknown force, a force that was bending the very fabric of space and time. Then came the chilling discovery. One of the passengers, a scientist by profession, found something that no one had expected. A set of coordinates that didn't match anything on any of the known maps of the world. These coordinates led nowhere that existed in the known world. In fact, they were off the charts, outside of the mapped areas of the globe. As the plane continued its eerie journey, the crew and passengers began to wonder if they had crossed over into another realm, perhaps a place beyond Earth, a place not bound by human knowledge or scientific understanding. The passengers were now trapped in a dimension where the rules of nature, physics, and reality didn't seem to apply. Days turned into weeks, and still, the plane roamed the skies. With no answers in sight, the survivors began to adapt to their new existence. They rationed food, created makeshift beds, and even learned to cope with the strange occurrences that had become a regular part of their lives. The once chaotic and desperate group found an eerie sense of unity in their shared fate. They weren't just survivors, they were the last of a flight that had disappeared without a trace. One day, as the plane began to approach what appeared to be the edge of this endless void, an unexpected event occurred. The aircraft suddenly accelerated, breaking through the strange fog that had been surrounding them. The sun broke through the clouds, and for the first time in weeks, the passengers saw light, real, solid, warm sunlight. They had crossed back into the world they knew, but when they finally landed at the nearest airport, they were met with the shocking truth. Flight 237 had been missing for years. All the records had been erased. No one had ever heard of them. What had happened? Had they truly crossed over to another world? Or was the answer far more complicated than anyone could have imagined? Only one thing was certain. The passengers of Flight 237 had become part of a mystery that would never be solved, one that would haunt them for the rest of their lives.